Okay, let's get this going. I don't know why it's that way. Where am I? There I am. Let's do the crossfade. Let's do it like that. Yeah, there we go. That's a nice crossfade. I made that a 2-second long crossfade. I like that. That's a better time than what it's set to by default. Anyway, good afternoon. Let me turn down the music. So, hello, welcome to Applied Digital Studies. This is a live stream for section 2. So, hopefully you're doing okay out there and watching. I'm looking at a few different things to keep an eye on while I'm talking today. So, it looks like a couple of you are watching on YouTube. So, hopefully that is going okay for you. But wherever you're watching, if you don't mind, if you can, please say hello in Discord so I can know that you're watching. So that's good to see. So I see Lillian and Aziza. So good afternoon. Thanks for saying hi. Remember, your comments will show up here as you type. And this is I'm back in the Twitch setup for today, kind of because it was requested and kind of because I haven't done it for a few days or weeks, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to tell how long things have been. But, I think there are some things I wanted to talk about today that made a little bit more sense to lecture about. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I've got the bird cam going live. It's been pretty quiet this afternoon, but there was a ton of activity during my 11:20 class this morning. And that was exciting to see. But it's been pretty quiet since then. It's interesting, though, because a whole bunch of different bird types showed up all together, and I think it's the same squad that I see every day, but it was interesting that they all showed up at once. So there was Carolina wren, a couple of different sparrows, the juncos, like a pair, I think there's a pair of juncos, and the cardinals, all were kind of hanging out and taking turns at the feeder, and then they all moved on together. So it's almost like they've got this interspecies bird squad, which I think is great. There's also I think they've moved on, but in the neighborhood there is a big squad of robins. But I think they actually left. I'm not totally sure, but I think robins might migrate in flocks, but they tend to, for the rest of the year, for most of the year, they actually hang out just on their own. So I don't know. It's always interesting to see. There's been a bunch of starlings in the yard too, but I haven't seen them at the feeder, which is fine with me. I think they are annoying. So anyway, so today we're going to be talking. I am the only one talking today. But I do want to hear your thoughts about some of the things I'm going to talk about. So that'll have to wait until Wednesday, I suppose. But today the theme or the topic is AI and education. This is continuing our unit, I guess, on artificial intelligence. But I want to look at how artificial intelligence is related to and impacted by or helps think about education, which is something that you are experiencing right now by participating in my class, but also you are participant in lots of different ways, and in some of those ways you may not be aware of how AI is part of that experience that you have, and so I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about that. Let's see, I don't see a ton of viewers here, but this is being recorded, so if you are watching this later, that's fine. Just make sure I guess I should probably have some system set up for you all to let me know if you're watching after the fact so that I can confirm that you're keeping up with things. I do worry sometimes because I don't see you all day to day. But at least a handful of you are watching, so I appreciate that. So today I have a slideshow. I guess I can share it. There's not a ton of content in it though. So sorry, that was something else I was trying. That was an earlier version. Let me get my link. I'll put it in Discord. Hope you all had a good weekend. I've continued my fishing attempt at fishing. We went to the Rappahannock Saturday, and then went to Old Costi Pond downtown yesterday, and still nothing. No, we haven't caught anything. We got, I think I got a couple of hits on my line yesterday because I know I did because I had bait in the water, and then I, got it, there was the bobber went up and down, and then I reeled it in, and my bait was gone. So that confirms to me at least there was something out there. Probably a fish, probably a catfish, but I shouldn't say that. I don't know what it was. I didn't see it. I don't know what is going on. But I had a hot dog, like a big chunk of hot dog on the line, and I've heard catfish like that, so that's what I was assuming I would catch with that. So maybe it was a catfish, maybe not. Maybe a turtle. I did see some turtles. I also did see a guy with a fish, like he caught it. So it was a trout. So there are fish out there to be caught. They're just not coming where I am. So, but we're not giving up yet. We've been fishing now 5 times in the last week or two, and still have not caught anything. But every time we go, we learn something, or I do at least. I learned a little something new to try, and it's nice being out by the water anyway. We got a tip about a pond down in Spotsylvania we're going to try out. Maybe sometime this week or the weekend. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I continue to welcome any tips you may have about fishing spots around town. Google Slides has changed their little thing here. Yeah, that makes sense. I like that. Cool. Okay, so AI and education. That's what we're talking about today. Oh yeah, the other thing is your proposals are due. So I hope they are done. I hope you've got them in. Actually, let me check. I want to see how many have been submitted, because I know I got at least a couple of requests to turn them in late, and that is fine. But I don't know how many people are doing that. I don't mind if you need a little bit more time to make it what it needs to be to create a good plan for your project, but I don't want you to put it off too long, because I want to be able to give you some feedback on it so I can... only 23 submissions graded, or only 23 submissions so far. That's about 11 missing. So, get on those sometime today, ideally, or if you need a little bit more time, let me know so that I can kind of help understand, so I can understand what you need in order to be successful, right? There's a few of you, I'm a little concerned that you have no idea what you're doing with this, and so I want to help you get on track. If you're watching and that's you fall into that category, then please get in touch. I want to help. Okay, so and if you are watching, if you have any questions right now, actually, if you feel like posing a question, you're welcome to type it in either of the chat spaces, any of the chat spaces, I should say. I have 3 different chat things on this monitor here, so I think I'll see them if you're on YouTube or Twitch or Discord. So feel free to drop those in if you have anything you'd like to ask or would like for me to show you or demonstrate here on the screen. Otherwise, I'm going to get started and talk about AI and education. All right, so I forgot to add that sub-bullet point. Here are 2 things that I would like for you to think about related to AI and education. And these are 2 very different approaches to putting those 2 things together. AI on the one hand, education on the other hand. I think there are 2 interesting things that we could mean by that. And I actually am interested in both. So first of all, I have noticed that whenever we talk about machine learning, when we talk about AI, we have this language of pedagogy built into it. Like, we have this idea of teaching and learning and built into the language we use to talk about programming machines to accomplish tasks that we call artificial intelligence, a particular set of computational tasks that we call artificial intelligence. And a lot of that language, I think, stems from the fact that we call it artificial intelligence, which is not to say that it is anything like human intelligence, but it has come to be known as a kind of programming, a set of programming ideas and challenges. And so we call it AI, and then when we talk about what we're doing with it to make it better, we tend to use words like training and teaching and learning. And these are things that we know, these are words that we use in other contexts to mean pretty different things, and that's part of what I wanted to talk about today. So that's one aspect of this. The other aspect of what I wanted to talk about today has to do with actual applications of artificial intelligence that you have experienced and been a subject of, even if you weren't aware of it, in the context of education. And specifically, I'm talking about 4 different things, and you'll see these come up in a couple. And I have 3 main examples that touch on all 4 of these things. Surveillance, for example, proctoring. I think those are actually probably should be the same bullet point. And then assessment, like using machine learning to interpret and assess your work. You've seen that a little bit in Perusal, and I showed you all that just as an example of how these things work. And then finally, predictive analytics, which is something that we actually use a fair amount in education, specifically in the context of advising. Speaking of advising, by the way, if I am your advisor, we should probably plan on meeting either this week or next week to talk about your fall registration, because that schedule should be out. Ooh, sorry, hit that microphone. That schedule should be out quite soon, if not already. I was actually, I'll take a look at it. I don't see it. Although I'm not sure where it would show up, but let me see if I can pull it up in Banner. I am just curious to see. It was supposed to be out by today. It is. There it is. Great. So, yeah, so that what I'm saying is that like you can go, and I'll show you now on this screen because I just tested it on my other screen. The schedule is available here through the registrar's webpage. So if you want to look at what's going on in fall 2021, you can do it this way. This used to work differently, right? You used to have just a whole list and you have to just use Control F to kind of find your way through it. But the nice thing about this is you can look for all the courses that have a particular designation, for example. So here's all the DI classes. So great. 33 different options. Great. That's good to see. That's something I'm interested in. Let's see what else we can search for. Not digital intensive. I wonder if we can search for major. No. I guess not. Okay. Well, we can search for, the program code, right? Like that. We don't care about comm, we care about digital studies. So here's all the digital studies classes being offered in the fall. Cool, okay. So yeah, this looks a little different. Like we are going to do what we often do for CDS, and I'll see if he's got to it yet. But Anand Rao usually has been doing this. I used to do this, but then I always found that Dr. Rao would beat me to it, and so I've just been letting him do it for the last few semesters, which is to make a list of all the courses that are offered in the fall that will meet different requirements for the CDS major or the digital studies minor. They will be, this is just a placeholder page right now, or it's like partially filled in, but it will be filled in with all the others because there are a lot actually. It's hard to find all of them sometimes. So it takes a little work to find them, and when we do, we like to go ahead and find them for you and then put them on a list so it's easy for you to know what you can take in the fall for different things for either program. So check that out. But anyway, it's open now. Make an appointment with me if you'd like to talk about your fall schedule. As you can see, for digital studies classes specifically, obviously lots of intro to digital studies class sections, which you do not need to take because you already have if you are in my applied digital studies class. Two other options though, well actually literally only one other option for you this fall, which is creative coding. So if you have enjoyed or been interested in the kind of things we've been doing in the Colab notebooks, especially this past week, then I recommend taking this class. So it's a lot of fun. I can tell you lots more about this class, but I don't plan on doing an advertisement for it today. But I actually have a promotional video I made for the class back in the spring. I'll share that with you all later. But it's a fun class. You don't have to have a ton of programming experience beforehand, just a willingness to learn some programming and kind of get into the nitty-gritty with it a little bit. We actually start off with a Twitter bot project and do a couple of things kind of like what we've done with the Markov chain stuff. But then we go a bit further as well with some JavaScript programming and stuff. And I'm actually going to be trying a whole new platform called Open Processing for this fall's version of the class. So new to me platform. So anyway, that's the fall schedule for DGST classes. Back to where I was. Here I was. Metaphors. Let's talk about metaphors. How did I get on that? Oh yeah, predictive analytics. That's how that was the tangent there, which is that in the context of advising, we do have predictive analytics tools, and I'll show you those later. But that's not important right now. Metaphors. That's what's important right now. Metaphors are important. So when we read Janelle Shane's book, or the excerpt from Janelle Shane's book, "You Look Like a Thing and I Love You," she gave us a really nice explanation of how machine learning works in a way that's very different from conventional computer programming or the kind of programming that we started off in this class when we did the hello world kind of stuff, and even like the list, the word counting stuff. All of that is conventional rule-based programming where you have a goal that you're trying to reach, and you write a set of steps for the computer to follow that will end up reaching that goal, whatever it is. Like you want to print the world, if you want to have it print the phrase hello world, that's usually a two-step process, maybe one, depending on your language, but you write each of those steps out and then you see the result and then you're done. That's different than machine learning, which tends to work in a very different way, where we know the end point, we probably know the starting point, and then we let the computer figure out all the in-between steps that it needs to accomplish in order to get to that end point. And Janelle Shane offers this analogy here that programming an AI is almost more like teaching a child than programming a computer. And she offers this almost as a throwaway line, but it got me thinking, is it really like programming a computer? Is teaching a child what is it like to teach a child? In other words, like embedded in this analogy is an idea about what teaching a child is like. And if you have children or no children or have been a child or maybe you're an education major, you might have some ideas about what teaching a child is like, what teaching a human is like, what teaching an adult is like. And it isn't always the same. At least there are ways in which it's very different than the kinds of things that happen to a machine as it's learning, as it's becoming more smart, so to speak, in terms of AI. Now, I don't mean to critique Janelle Shane's use of this analogy. I think it's appropriate for what she's talking about. I think it's a clever way to express it, and I think her book is great. So I'm not critiquing that at all. But it raises an interesting question to me. I mean, she offers it. It's almost like a throwaway line at the end of a section in her book. But I kind of want to spend a little time with this metaphor to think about what it might mean. So just to kind of review a little bit what we've already talked about, when we talk about artificial intelligence, there tend to be two kinds of things that we mean by that, right? So we talked about this a while ago in fictional context, right? We have HAL 9000, Lieutenant Commander Data, Agent Smith, Colossus, Terminator. We came up with a pretty long list of other examples of general AI, or this acronym, this GOFAI, that stands for good old-fashioned AI. I just came across that acronym recently, but apparently it's widely used. I don't know. And it's referring to a particular kind of thing that we imagine AI to be, or that we might think we're heading toward in terms of AI today. On the other hand, we have narrow AI, which includes things like machine learning, predictive analytics, neural networks, generative adversarial networks, natural language processing, bunches of other applications. But the key thing is that these are narrow applications of AI. And narrow means that they are good at doing one thing or just a very small set of things. And they can often be pretty good at those things and very quick at those kinds of things. And they can look at things in ways that humans can't. And there are reasons to do that. And these are good things usually, if done right. But they are certainly nowhere near general AI. So the main thing to keep in mind when we make this distinction between general AI over here and narrow AI over there is that these are not real. That we're not talking about. We're not really worried about these. I'm not worried about machines taking over the planet. I'm not worried about these philosophical questions about whether a machine has a soul, because we're just so far away from that as a species, like as a technology. It's just not really what we're talking about. That said, as we've noticed, when we talk about the narrow stuff, when we talk about and think about narrow kinds of AI, the language of general AI or beliefs about general AI or stereotypes or cliches or prejudices about general AI creep into the language we use to talk about narrow AI and also the applications that we put it to. And I think one example of that actually is the way that we use these words like heuristics and analysis and training and learning to talk about what the machine is doing as a result of these processes that we've put it into. And whether or not that's a valid metaphor is kind of hard to say, because I think we do tend to think, when we think of learning as a thing that a human does, I think we mean as something pretty complex, something pretty nuanced, something kind of unknowable, because we keep studying it, keep trying to figure out the best ways to do it in a pedagogical context. And a big part of the way that we do that in a pedagogical context, by the way, has to do with understanding our shared humanity, understanding that I as a teacher, you as a student, we are both humans, we share a set of problems and concerns, and I respect you as a student, you respect me as a teacher, hopefully, and together we accomplish this thing we call learning, or we hopefully we do, or we construct it through our experience, whatever it is. I don't think that's anything like what's happening in a computer, although it's a convenient kind of metaphor to talk about. So yeah, just to kind of, I'll just keep it on this slide for now. Just to think about what's happening, if you recall, actually I think I have it here in the right tab. Yeah. So if you think about all of the steps that a computer goes through between being assigned the task of generating a knock-knock joke, for Janelle Shane's example, and the point where it can generate something that looks like a knock-knock joke, there's a long distance between those two. And essentially the way that it moves through those, especially at the beginning, is by guessing. By saying, okay, you want a knock-knock joke that's 1,000 characters long, here's 1,000 random characters. And then it's like, then there's a discriminator part of the function sometimes. I don't know how this exact one was set up, but that's often how these things are built. So there's something then that says, okay, how close was that to where I was trying to get to? Not very close. Well, what happens if I change one letter out of those 1,000? Is that closer or farther? And if it's closer, then it's like, okay, great, let's keep that. And then let's try again. Here's another random 1,000 letters. Let's see how that goes. And that would be an incredibly time-consuming process for a human to do. But for a machine to do it, it can happen very, very quickly, several times a second. And then eventually it kind of grinds its way towards a solution. And that is not how humans learn. That's not how I learn usually. I don't sort of guess until I get something that feels right and then try to build on it that way. Except, maybe there's some kind of chemical analogy to that in my brain. I don't know. But at least as a human learner, I perceive myself as operating differently because I already got this kind of training built in. Right. So I don't think that's really a terrible metaphor actually to talk about how computers work, and it's a useful phrase that we use. But I think it does kind of lead us to certain things. Like if we presume that machine learning as a discipline, as a software problem, if we presume that it equals machines learning, in other words, if we conflate the narrow application of machine learning with the general application of general AI, like teaching children, robot children, then what does it say about what we think of machines? I think that it means that we tend to over-attribute their sentience, their reliability, and their identity as intersubjective beings, which they are not. But that's an easy thing to critique, and I think we're there. I think we've covered that pretty well so far. The other thing that I think is pretty interesting, though, is like, what does that say about what we think happens when we learn? Like, if we think of a computer, like when I connect to this GPU to run Code Practice 7, right? So what am I connecting to, right? When I go to runtime, it's basically it's a bucket, and I'm trying to pour knowledge into that bucket, and I'm trying to pour into it, in this case, the knowledge of how to write a Star Trek: The Next Generation script. And it pounds its way towards that until I was curious for this particular one. I just ran it a few minutes ago, or before class, and I ran it in terms of the epochs. This is one of those words I always stumble over. These things, let's call it generations. Why not? I was curious to see what would happen if I just ran it for one, and it wasn't terrible actually. I thought it would be pretty bad, but it actually was not that far off. Other than I think that it's more closely just copying something from an existing episode and then like randomly putting in different letters. I don't know. I actually really like some of these phrases now that I look at it. Riker, there's trouble. So your friends, Sapior, still could probe upstreamery. It's allowed, Coreface. Dead, it wished to clear Concity the chickiening, briffering deshanters. I mean, it really sounds like Finning his wake, actually. That's pretty cool. It enters when has relevance, my class stars away all warrants. I mean, these are words that are pronounceable. Like, that's pretty good. Securify you, Kamina Rick. That's pretty good. Okay, so, Kamina Rick. Anyway, the point is, I don't think it's learning. I don't think it's like watching an episode and then deciding what it thinks about it. There's clearly something pretty far from that. All right, so when we get to... So all that's to say, like, there's this idea of, let me leave it blank for a second. There's this idea of learning that I think drifts back into how we think about using technology to solve problems around learning. And I don't think actually, maybe that's the wrong way to say it, because the problems that I'm about to talk about and that you experience really have very little to do with learning and much more to do with the system of school, which is not the same thing as learning. And the system of school, the system of education is something that we hope, I guess, if we're idealistic, we hope, I am idealistic. This is something we hope creates learning or leads to learning or helps you find your learning, whatever philosophy you ascribe to. But we hope that learning happens. But just because it's a system does not guarantee that it's going to be successful at doing that. And I think there are certainly places in which technology has been applied in ways that might not be the best application of those technologies. There's another book I'm reading right now that I really like, and I might end up excerpting parts of it for you. It's called Artificial Unintelligence by Meredith Broussard. And one of the things she talks about in that book is what she calls techno-chauvinism or technological chauvinism. And it's the tendency to offer technological solutions to human problems when there's a human solution that makes more sense, basically. That's it in a nutshell, I think. And I think some of the things I want to show you might be examples of that. So she calls it techno-chauvinism because it does have a kind of misogynist or masculinist kind of origin, right? Like these are stories about the origins of computing in some cases that she's talking about in that book. And her argument essentially is that the stuff that we have today is the legacy of systems that were created in the 1950s, 60s, 70s that were largely male, largely chauvinistic kind of environments. And so she's critiquing things today by looking at the long history of it. It's a really good book. Anyway, let's talk about one of the applications of this and one of the examples of where I think AI in particular has the potential to do harm within the context of an educational system. I'm going to show you some examples, and before I do that, let me be clear about a couple of things. Some of these systems I have not actually used, so I can talk about what I've learned about them through just like from reporting and things I've seen. A couple of cases I'm going to show you things that I don't think are inherently bad or evil, but they are still using artificial intelligence in ways that you as a student might not know about. And so I wanted to make sure you know about it because I think transparency is a value. So I want to show you those things. Okay, now if this were a live class or a Zoom class, I would be interested to kind of pose this as a question, which is Proctorio. Do you know what Proctorio is? Have you used Proctorio in some classes, either at UMW or elsewhere, or have you been required to use it? If you have, then just go ahead and let me know in the chat. I'll keep saying some things about it, just either way. So feel free to chime in if you have anything. In section 1, there was at least one student who had experienced it at a different school. So Proctorio, the word here comes from proctor, proctoring as in observing someone taking an exam to make sure that they are not cheating. And so this has to do with, like, I guess honor enforcement would be another way to think of this, yeah, I guess that's the right way that's the only other alternative word I can think of. So Becky, you're saying you're not familiar with it. That's okay. And that's maybe good because as you'll see, there are some reasons to be skeptical about it. All right, so Proctorio is a tool that is integrated with, or can be integrated with, learning management systems like Canvas. And let me see if I can make sure I grab the right tab. Okay, this will work. I can get there from here. This is Canvas, by the way. This is our Canvas course. And I will show you how I got this quote here. Actually, let me read the quote and then I'll show you where I got it from. So this is what Proctorio says about itself. Again, in the context of proctoring exams, they say, Proctorio's live and fully automated remote proctoring service provides a scalable, cost-effective solution to ensure the total learning integrity of every assessment every time. Proctoring eliminates human error, bias, and much of the expense associated with remote proctoring, identity verification, and originality verification. So let's take a look. I highlighted a couple of phrases here. The idea that it eliminates human error and eliminates human bias to kind of connect the dots there, and much of the expense. So I can't really comment on the expense. I don't know what the expenses are of remote proctoring. Sure. I mean, I imagine that if a solution existed that could happen, where this could happen more or less automatically, or even mostly automatically, certainly it would be cheaper. I can imagine it would be cheaper. But the idea that it eliminates human error, that's a bit iffy. Certainly that it eliminates bias. If we think about, if we agree with Kathy O'Neill, if we think about what Kathy O'Neill said and we agree with it, then this claim, I think we would have to reject this claim. Kathy O'Neill's nicely encapsulated explanation of bias in algorithms was that all an algorithm is someone's opinion formally expressed in math. And so, of course, it's going to have bias and prejudice and human whatever in it. Like, it's not just math. It's math that identifies something, and whatever it identifies or does has a human context. And of course, it's going to have different kinds of impacts on different kinds of people. Like, that's just how things are. So I think that's there's an overreaching claim in this Proctorio statement. So let me show you where I got this, just to kind of illustrate where it would appear to me, at least. I don't know if anyone at UMW uses it, but they certainly could, because it is available here in Canvas. So this is Canvas. Obviously, you can see this is the back end of our course like the Canvas course for our for our class, and you can see that yeah, it's here. I can install it. I got that quote here from this explanation of Proctorio. Now, it's easy for me not to use Proctorio for two reasons. One is, as I pointed out, my philosophical concerns about its overreaching claims. There are directly related to that are some ethical concerns. The other thing too is, like, in this class and in really all my classes, it just doesn't really make sense to have high stakes exams be the main way that I understand your learning. And there are other ways to find out what you're learning and to give you an opportunity to explore things and learn things. And a high stakes exam doesn't fit into my teaching. So I do some quizzes in one of my classes, like in my electronic literature class, but those aren't high stakes. I hope students believe me when I tell them that. Like, I really want to understand what they're learning, and so I do pose it as a Canvas quiz, but it's an open note quiz. They're encouraged to, I've designed it that way. Like, I know that they're going to look at the material. I want them to. All that said, for some disciplines, for other teachers, high stakes exams or, that experience is something that they've found useful in their teaching, or that they rely on in their teaching at least. And, I'm not going to second guess someone else's pedagogical prerogative. Well, maybe but not in this lecture anyway. This is something that I hope people are thoughtful about if they do use this kind of thing. But it is something that it's kind of easy for me not to use, basically, is what I'm saying. I'm kind of acknowledging my privilege here in that sense, that I don't need something like this. Like, I don't do high stakes exams at all, so I don't need a tool to solve my remote proctoring problem, because I don't have a remote proctoring problem. Anyway, Proctorio offers to solve that problem for people who do have that. And, whether they do or not is, I think, an interesting question. So let's take a look at some people's discussions of some of the issues around this. So what it does, basically, for those of you who don't know, which may be all of you, I don't know, one of the things it does is it's trying to make sure that you are, wherever you are, in your dorm, at home, Starbucks, wherever you're taking this exam, that you're not cheating. And it does this in several ways. This Proctorio and Respondus that's another tool I'm going to show you in a minute. These are tools that are trying to ensure that you're not cheating. And they use machine vision and machine learning heuristics to try to isolate or identify, or really just flag, students that they think might be cheating. And there are several things that they do to keep you from cheating. One of these is, well, you can see right here, they're listed here as recording, lockdown, and verification. And so what I think this means for Proctorio is, lockdown means you have your browser, let's say it's Chrome, and you're not allowed to open other tabs or other windows. So it just locks you into that one browser tab, forces you to stay right there, and if you attempt to break out of that, or like you open another window somewhere else, it will flag that as cheating. Or I think recording, I think it means two kinds of recording. I think it actually records your entire desktop screen and your webcam. So it has your webcam turned on, you watching you take the test, and it's watching you to see if you're doing things physically that a cheater would do. And it uses machine vision to make those kinds of, to figure out where you are and what you're looking at. If you remember that story face thing we played with a few weeks ago, using that kind of thing to keep track of where you're looking, and really even just your body language and anything. We don't know, the thing is, we don't know exactly what tools like this are looking for, but because it's a machine learning kind of black box, and also a proprietary product. But it seems like that and this is just based on reporting and people's descriptions of it. I don't actually use it, so I don't know. But the idea seems to be that if you are frequently looking at a particular point off, let's say up there, it might notice that. Like, it might notice that you tend to be looking in the same place away from the screen, and so it might flag that as potentially cheating, because maybe you're looking at the answers taped to the wall over there, or in your lap. Like, if you had your phone down here and you were doing like this and you kept like doing like that, maybe that would show up as the kind of behavior that would be consistent with cheating. Some of these tools also require you to record your entire room. So if you have a laptop, you're supposed to literally like turn the webcam on, spin it around the room, record the entire room to verify that there's nothing around you that could be used for cheating. So that should feel a little weird to you, or maybe it doesn't, but I hope it does. That would feel weird to me. I don't mind sharing my room that I'm working in. I frequently do actually, but that's something that I have a choice about, and also a fair amount of privilege when I do that. Like, I'm the professor. I'm not really vulnerable here. But I think you could imagine, even if you can't think of it for yourself, how some people might feel uncomfortable about sharing their circumstance, their location, or what's in their dorm room. Who else might be there with them? Maybe their roommates there, but they haven't consented to this kind of surveillance. They're not part of the class. They just happen to be there. So it doesn't make sense to record them doing that. I don't know. So this is a list. This is just a Twitter thread from last fall where this person, I don't know this person, but she is kind of explaining some of the issues with Proctorio and how it disproportionately affects and harms people that are more vulnerable. So people that might not feel safe in their homes, or that might not feel safe sharing their location, or people that might have distractions around them that are just part of their environment where they don't have any other choice. That's where they happen to be. And in any case, it's really just going to be flagging these. And so ultimately it's just making more work for the professor anyway. So these are kind of a list of problems with Proctorio. So Respondus is another tool that has the same thing, that works the same way. And this is actually a lawsuit filed against Respondus, or really against the University of Texas at Arlington, about their use of Respondus. This was filed last week, and it describes some of these things that I talked about, and you can kind of get a sense of this if you look at it in the full PDF of the filing. I should say, I guess I'm not a lawyer. I find legal things like this interesting, but I don't have the background or education really to interpret some parts of this document. But this part of it makes sense to me, certainly. It describes the facial recognition technology, as it says, facial detection technology, which is maybe a subclass of what we talked about. But detection is something that, as the filing here notes, something that has a harder time with darker skinned people like their client here, like the plaintiff in this case, who is, it's a John Doe, but they describe him as a male with darker skin who perhaps might not have been recognized as clearly by the software. And so what they're saying is that Respondus raised a flag. The defendants, in this case the professor and the TAs, I think, they responded to that flag and penalized the student to the extent of administrative withdrawal. So he was essentially kicked out of school over their interpretation of his behavior during the test as consistent with cheating. So, of course, whether or not that actually is the case that's what this lawsuit's about. But their claim here is that there's a lot of reasonable doubt here to suggest that perhaps it's more plausible that the professors here simply acted on their prior preconceived biases about this student in recognizing that flag and then responding to it the way they did, as interpreting it as cheating. So, of course, whether or not, I don't know the details of the case beyond this filing. I'm not making any judgment about it, but I thought some parts of this claim were pretty interesting. So here they note, for example, that having made this claim, saying that, again, the plaintiffs is the student, in this case the defendants are the instructors in the university. They're saying, further and more importantly, Ford and Heron did not provide the plaintiff his individual review by Respondus monitor. As a result, he did not know which of his movements caused him to be flagged and was therefore unable to refute the program's specific allegations of suspected cheating. So this is going back to Kathy O'Neill, we keep going back to her, but when she talks about a weapon of math destruction, opacity, or the fact that you can't explain how it works, that's a big red flag for her. So that's a big weapon of math destruction issue. And that's kind of what you see here, where there was some kind of flag, but the defendants here didn't even, or they didn't, or perhaps even couldn't explain what had caused that flag to be issued in the first place. I haven't seen the software, but I imagine it could be something that just raises a flag, and you can't really see why, because it's using machine vision and other kinds of applied heuristics to make those determinations. So you can't figure it out, even if you look at the report it generates. It just says, here's a flag, which is, I suspect that's probably what it does. So maybe they couldn't explain it, but in any case, they didn't. And so the defendant, or the plaintiff here, is arguing that he has a right to know, and I think he does. Anyway, moreover, as you notice here in Claim 13, Believing the computer program over plaintiff and ignoring his oral and documentary evidence to support his innocence, defendant's acts were arbitrary and capricious and denied plaintiff the process he was due for a disciplinary suspension. So they're saying that they violated his rights, basically, as a student. And that they believed the computer program instead of believing the plaintiff, which is that's the problem, right? When we get to that point where we're believing computer programs instead of people, then we are usually in dangerous territory. That's the real risk of AI, not Skynet taking over the country and destroying humanity. The risk is that we use beliefs about the infallibility of computational processes to make decisions that hurt people, and that's what this looks like. Again, I don't know the details, but at least the way that they're putting that suggests that that's what's going on to me. But again, I'm not a lawyer. Don't know the specifics of the case. Okay, so perusal, we looked at that in some detail. I don't want to belabor that too much because I did go over it a couple times already. But perusal is doing some of this kind of surveillance on your reading as well, and I hope that I made that clear when I talked about it. I hope that's understandable. I'm not. I view this as a very low stakes situation, especially because I'm not grading it at all. But I was curious to see what the AI in here, what the machine learning of perusal would use in evaluating your comments. It's still not very clear to me. There is something they call the quality algorithm, which I've not been able to find any explanation of how it actually works, but I'll keep looking. I'm curious. But just to be clear, I'm not using it to inform any judgments about any of you, so don't worry about it. I'm just curious about it. I'm curious about what this reading system is doing, not what you've done with it, if that makes sense. But I don't want to belabor that because I've already spent a fair amount of time on it. But I did want to show you. No, okay, I can't. Okay, let me turn this off for a second. I'm going to log back into this tool because I wanted to show you how predictive analytics are used at UMW. And okay, there we go. I had to click away from my login screen because when I first log into EAB, which is our advising dashboard thingy, it shows me reports. It gives me like a summary of reports about you. So I didn't want to show that on the stream, obviously. So this is kind of interesting though, and this is something that this is going to be this is going to be a trend analysis, and so it's not going to actually show any individual data. That said, if you are a student who has been enrolled between in this time frame, if you first enrolled, I guess it's okay. I think I misread this earlier. It's actually first enrolled between fall 2013 and fall 2018, which would include many of you, I guess. Then your data will be in this graph that I'm about to generate. Well, it's not a graph. It's more like I think I call it a report. Actually, we go here, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, wait. Oh, what's happening? There it goes. Okay. So it gives us, what this does is it gives us several courses, and then with each of these courses, it breaks down a predictive analysis of these and other things too. I don't totally understand some of this stuff, so I don't really know how to explain it, but I think there are some interesting findings here, or some things do kind of stand out. Specifically, if we focus at this class, the one that we're in right now, Applied Digital Studies, this tells us that this data set includes 186 students who attempted the class. And I don't really understand course rank. I think that has to do with, it's kind of like its confidence in how predictive this course is. So the predictive cutoff grade means that if you got a B- or higher in this class, then you had a good chance of graduating. But if you got below that, then you were at high risk of not graduating on time. I think that's what that's saying. The average grade is 3.6 out of 4, so that's pretty good. So basically, this is saying that most students get an A or A-, and really the average grade is probably an A-. So that's consistent with my anecdotal experience of this class. That seems about right. So I think this is kind of interesting. Some of the other interesting things though, that really jump out if you scroll down here is if you look at a course like Computer Science 110. So this is 138 CDS majors who have taken this class. It actually ranks this as 1, as in the most predictive class, although I don't really understand that. And again, I'm not sure if I don't know if 1 is high or low, if that makes sense. I don't know which direction the scale actually goes in. But this does tell us that actually a lot of students failed this class or got a D or F in this class in Computer Science 110. So that's not students overall, but this is CDS students. And so that's interesting, and that tells us that something's going on there. We need to kind of learn about it or think about a curriculum at a curriculum level. Like, evaluate, does this class is it really fitting well within the major? Is this a good challenge? I mean, obviously it's challenging students, so is this a good challenge, or is this something that we should think about differently? I don't know. Com 460 is another one that obviously you have to take for this class, and so it's number 2, which again, I don't totally understand what's going on there, but it does look like most students pass that class by comparison with 110. Okay, so that's AIB. The final thing I wanted to show you in terms of analytics is this score here. So this is the thing I didn't want to accidentally reveal without obscuring the actual content of it. Whenever I log into AIB, this is the first thing I see. And it shows me my students, what it thinks of as my advisees right now. I only have 25. I usually have a lot more, but for some reason I'm only at 25 right now. But I know why. But anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is I have 25 advisees, and it gives me this quick view of how they're doing, how you're doing. And some of you are on this list. This is the thing I'm showing you here is this right column. It does show me your GPA and other things, but on the right here, it shows me your its perception of your support need, like how much you need to hear from me, how much help you need from me. And most of you are, I'm pleased to say, are low in the sense that you don't need much help from me. But a couple of you are high or moderate. And how it reaches those determinations is a little unclear to me, although at least just kind of looking at it and connecting the dots. Sometimes if another faculty member flags a student as at risk or something, then it shows up here in my view. Sometimes it doesn't, actually. I've seen that happen and not change this support need column. In other cases, it's harder to tell. I mean, there's nothing binding about this. I can actually look at several of these that are flagged for me right now, and actually I know what's going on. I know it's not a big deal, or I've already followed up with them or whatever. Like I can evaluate those things as an individual, but as a global system, if you see a whole bunch of flags or a whole bunch of high support needed, then that might change the overall dynamics or understanding of the environment on campus, right? I don't know. There's a similar view, which I'm not going to pull up, but in Canvas, Canvas also tells me how it thinks you're doing in the class. Not a grade, right? Because those are up to me, but it gives me an engagement metric. I guess it's a rank of, it's 3 stars, but it can be like percentages of stars, like half of a star or like 2.3 stars and something like that. But out of 3 stars, how engaged are you is what it's trying to measure there. And what I think that's actually measuring is just like, how often do you check Canvas? How long do you look at Canvas when you check it? And that's it. I think that's what it's checking when it gives me that view. But it's taken the idea that viewing a page means reading it, and then reading it means you're engaged, and then being engaged means you're doing well in the class. Like there's several connections there that aren't always the case. Could have plenty of exceptions that would explain a different interpretation of what you're doing or not doing with the Canvas course. And ultimately, it's a kind of surveillance that I don't really need to know. I mean, I don't know that I want to know exactly how long you spend looking at my assignments or my announcement page. Doesn't really add anything to my life, but it's there, So I don't know. There's a lot going on in Canvas that is a little bit mysterious to me, certainly, and probably to you as well. So we are about out of time. So actually, we are. It's time. It's time to end. So thanks for watching, everyone. And we will be Zooming again on Wednesday, and then probably Friday as well, but definitely Wednesday. I have a couple things to send you, but mainly you've got the proposal done, and that's good. So tomorrow is spring break, right? Sort of. So enjoy your spring break tomorrow, and maybe go fishing if you can. If you find any good fishing spots, just let me know. Maybe I'll see you out there. Actually, I don't know. I won't have time to fish tomorrow. Unless I go early. I might go early. Actually, this time of year, I mean, since we just sprang forward, right, it should be easier to get up early in relation to the sunrise. So, yeah, maybe we'll try fishing at dawn tomorrow. I'll see if I can convince any of my kids to join me. All right, well, have a good afternoon, everyone. I'll switch on the bird cam for a few minutes in case anything shows up, but it's empty. I don't know what's going on. It seems kind of weirdly quiet in the backyard. All right, so have a good day, everyone. See you later.